video, we are going to be talking about how I outlined my current novel in progress, The Lunar Quartz Library, and basically I'm going to share with you all of my tips. Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melanie Steele and I am the author of 3 non-fiction books all about cozy living, and I'm currently drafting my first novel, The Lunar Quartz Library, which is a cozy fantasy. Before we get into the different methods of plotting, or indeed not plotting your novel, let's quickly discuss why you should probably outline your novel. I think the main benefit to having some sort of outline, even if it is a loose outline, is to avoid writer's block. How many times have you gone to sit down, write a chapter, write a scene, write anything at all, and your mind is just... I know I have. It's mainly because I don't know what I'm writing. I have no idea what I'm trying to do with this scene or this chapter because I haven't outlined it. I haven't even decided on a setting, dialogue, what the whole point of this chapter or scene is. So having a loose outline is the #1 way to avoid writer's block. The other advantage to having a very loose outline, avoiding plot holes. Now, there are definitely still some plot holes in my book. In all fairness, I'm only on my first draft, but having an outline can certainly help you to avoid / minimize plot holes because you have taken the time to create a story, to think about where it's going, and to hopefully avoid too many loose threads. And this is going to save you valuable time when it comes to edits. So avoiding plot holes is another really good reason to consider some sort of outline. When it comes to outlining a novel, there are generally 3 camps that people fall into. You are either a plotter, a pantser, or a plantser, which is where you meet somewhere in the middle. So a plotter is someone who meticulously plots out every aspect of their novel. They are plotting out the entire story, they are creating their characters, their character arcs, descriptions of everything. They are just very meticulous because they are the sort of people that want to know everything about their story before they begin writing it. Now, pantsers in the other camp are the sort of people who believe that their drafting process is a discovery process, that as they draft their story, it's going to come to life on the page. The characters are going to tell the author who they are. The settings are going to reveal themselves. The story is all going to come to life as they draft the story. It is very often referred to as a discovery draft. The first draft for someone who follows the pantser method. They tend to be of the opinion that if you plot everything out, that the inspiration for writing your book is just gone. It is just too much for them. They need to be in the zone. They need to be just drafting as they go. That's what works for them. Now, in the middle, we have people that are basically taking a little bit of plotting, a little bit of pantsing, hence the term pantsing. These people will typically outline some part of their book. For example, they'll want to know where their story begins, where it's going to the midpoint, how it ends, a few events in between, but they're also going to let the draft offer them a chance to discover their characters and their settings in more detail. So now, of course, you're wondering, where do I fall on this scale from plotter to pantsers? And I would say more towards plotting, less towards pantsing, but maybe not in the middle. I know, no easy answers, right? So the method that I use to outline my books is the Save the Cat Writes a Novel method by Jessica Brody, based on the books by Blake Snyder, who is a renowned screenwriter. Now, my main reason for using this particular method is that I studied screenwriting at undergraduate level, and I've also studied film at postgraduate level, which means that when I'm thinking about story and characters, I'm thinking very much in the vein of filmmaking, television making, visuals, screenwriting, as opposed to more traditional outlining novel methods, because I am considering in a much more visual way than would typically be associated with writing a novel. So if you're not super familiar with, say, the Cat Writes a Novel or screenwriting in general, essentially this book covers the 15 beats that are ordinarily found in most Western Hollywood filmmaking. These are the beats that we have come to expect from stories, and if they're missing, we are quite often aware something is wrong, even if we can't put our finger on it. It's just a method of storytelling that is very familiar to a Western audience. So in Save the Cat, there are 15 beats, as I've said. So these 15 beats fall under 6 different phases of a story, I think would be the best way to describe it. So setup, debate, fun and games, bad guys close in, dark night of the soul, finale. I think out of all those, Dark Night of the Soul is the one that most people would recognize. It's quite a common turn of phrase across writing a novel, and it does feature in other methods for outlining a novel, such as Ken Weiland's method. So for me personally, I take it beat by beat, and I do work from beginning to end. Some people prefer to work in the middle and then go back to the beginning, then go forward to the end. But I like to write in a more logical start, middle, end type fashion. So I'll often keep the book next to me as a reference, particularly when I'm revising parts of my story as the stage I'm now at in writing it. So I will basically have a list of all the beats, and I will make notes about what is going to happen in my story that ties into each of those beats, which obviously the book goes into in more detail. So if you're interested in what each of these beats accomplishes, go check out the book. It will outline it in much more detail. So essentially, once I have something written down for each of the 15 beats, it's often very basic. I then go ahead and develop these ideas using a note card system. Now, I use index cards to basically create each of my scenes, so that I know what each scene is doing. What is the purpose of each scene? So each scene card that I write is breaking down the goal, the conflict, and the outcome. Now, some people prefer to think in scenes, some people prefer to think in chapters. A scene is not a chapter is not a scene, except for if you are writing very short chapters, which will typically only take place in one location. Then possibly your scene and your chapter are one of the same, but typically a chapter is longer than a scene. I prefer to work in scenes because that's how I visualize what is happening in my story. So for me, each index card is an individual scene, and I keep them basically all together in a folder so that I can reference them throughout my outlining process. Now, of course, sometimes things change and I have to go back, scrap an index card and basically rewrite it because I've decided that that scene just doesn't work. And this does happen, guys. You will write scenes and just decide this absolutely does not work, and so you'll need to go back and redraft it, and I find having a fresh new index card really helps. Now, unfortunately, because my novel is in progress, I am not going to show you my index cards, but I will point you towards this video by Sarah Cannon where she shows her method, which is basically the same as mine, because that's where I was inspired to do it from. And she shows you in depth how to use this method to outline your book. Once I have basically outlined the story on index cards, I'm starting to feel more confident. I feel that I know where it's going from point A to point B to point C, etc. However, it is still very bare bones. I might have character names and settings, but they're not fleshed out in any way. So the next part of my outlining process to get more detail in, because I'm certainly not the sort of person that could completely pants this aspect of my writing. I have a story Bible, which is basically a B6 strategy notebook. And in here, I have all sorts of details about my book. Now, obviously, as I've said, my book is still a work in progress, so I'm not going to show you in any detail what's in here, but I can tell you I have things like character profiles, I have visual representations of objects and people that inspire my world. There's a lot of world building in here because I'm writing a cozy fantasy, so I am, you know, creating this whole new world. So there are lots of things drawn from Pinterest that I find inspiring, other images that I feel just evoke a sense of what I'm trying to capture with my writing. They all go in here alongside character profiles, maps, descriptions of apartments or houses or buildings, so I know where I have placed things, so that if a character is in a building going from one room to the next, it makes sense and that they are not going in a completely different fashion each time. Essentially, this is more detailed than my note cards and allows me to add more flourish to the outlining of my book. It's also a great place for jotting down things that come to me as I'm writing, or if I'm experiencing problems with plotting. I have pages in here devoted to plot holes that I need to fix. Now, I do my writing in Scrivener, and there is plenty of capacity in Scrivener to do this in a digital format, and indeed most people using Scrivener are using that aspect of it. For me personally, I prefer to do it by hand, this part of it. When I'm thinking up ideas and plots and characters, for me it needs to come from here to writing by hand. It's just not something that I can type. I don't know why, that's just me personally. I can absolutely type the story because of course I can, but all of the inspiration, the outlines, all of these things I just prefer to do by hand. It also gives me an excuse to make it look very pretty with stickers and pens, but of course none of that is necessary, and that is just a personal preference. So yeah, as well as using note cards to outline scenes, having my story Bible, which for me is this B6 strategy, is a super helpful way of fleshing out more detail before I actually get into writing my story. The final tool that I use to outline my story is a whiteboard. Now, of course, I appreciate not everyone watching this has their own office to have a whiteboard, or even has the space to have a whiteboard. But having this big space that I can just write on and just get everything out of my brain is so handy. If you don't have space for this, what I would recommend is getting big sheets of paper, like the sort of thing you would use on a easel or Flipboard chart, something like that, because you could just stick that to your wall with some blue tack, and then you have this big kind of space to just brainstorm or work through problems with your plot. Essentially, just having this bigger space rather than just a small notebook, for me personally, is really important to outlining. And currently on my whiteboard, I have the scenes I'm working through for the final act of my first draft of my book. This is predominantly why I filmed that in reverse, because I don't want anyone reading that. So I apologize, it might not have been the clearest shot, but it was just to demonstrate that it is there and that I am actively using it. So yeah, if you don't have a whiteboard, just get yourself some really big sheets of paper, stick them on a wall, and then have at it. Just go crazy, get all of your ideas out. It's really, really satisfying way to do it. Ooh, we've gone through everything that I use, so I'm going to put a brief summary in now. So I use the Save the Cat novel outlining method, which features a 15-step beat cheat sheet. I essentially go through each of those beats and make a very brief description of what I would like to happen in my story to meet the requirements of each beat. I then take those very small ideas and I use scene cards to flesh them out. So for each idea that I have, I make it into a scene with a goal, a conflict, and an outcome. And I keep all of these together in a binder. And when I start drafting using those scene cards, if they basically change, I just throw it away, start with a new one. I make sure I keep them up to date so that I can very quickly go through my cards in my folder and see where the story is going without necessarily having to load Scrivener. And once I have outlined all of my scenes, I like to use my B6 strategy as a world building Bible, and in there I will have much more detail about things like the world that we are building, the characters, the buildings, basically all of the stuff that is going to flesh out my novel. All of the ideas end up in my world building book. But equally, if you use a program like Scrivener, if you're writing, you can do this digitally if you would prefer, but writing things by hand is a part of the creative process for me, which leads on to my final tool for outlining, which is my whiteboard. It's basically just a big space where I can get anything out of my head that I need to work through, work on, whatever. It just comes out, jot it down, and it's just a lot easier for me than dealing with a small notebook. There are less limitations. As I said, if you don't have a whiteboard, you don't have your own dedicated space, getting some flip chart paper that is very, very big can be the same effect, and you can just stick on all with blue tack and get going with writing your ideas on there. Just having that big space I find particularly helpful. I hope you have enjoyed this video on how I outline my book. I hope you've enjoyed this video of me sharing how I'm outlining my current book, The Lunar Quartz Library. If you did find it helpful, I'd love for you to leave a comment down below with which of these tips you found the most helpful, or if you do something else with outlining your novel, or you don't outline a novel, leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear from you. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and the bell to make sure you get notifications about all my future videos. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.